lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, and tonight we're venturing into a place where death is no longer a certainty, and mercy may be the first casualty. Most of us take comfort in the idea that every journey has an end. No matter how difficult the road becomes, no matter how much suffering a person endures, there is an unspoken belief that one day, somehow, it will all finally be over. It's a comforting thought until someone decides that the ending is optional. History is filled with stories of ambitious men attempting to conquer morality. Alchemists searched for the elixir of life. Physicians chased impossible cures. Scientists pushed the boundaries of ethics in pursuit of discoveries they believed would change the world forever. Time and again, those pursuits have forced humanity to ask the same unsettling question. Just because something can be done, does that mean it ever should? Tonight's tale explores that question from behind the walls of a psychiatric prison, where one volunteer's simple desire to help others slowly draws him toward a secret hidden behind a door everyone else pretends not to notice. What begins as an act of compassion soon becomes a descent into a nightmare of government secrecy, impossible medical research, and a discovery so horrifying that it forever changes the meaning of life, death, and everything that lies in between. Turn down the lights, settle in, and get cozy. The show is about to begin. Tonight's featured tale of terror comes to us courtesy of author Kenneth Cole. Performed by Otis Gyrie, I present to you The Montford Experiment.
My name's Jim Hutchison. Most people call me Hutch, even in my professional life. My family-owned business is as a concrete contractor, and we perform work for a variety of private and federal clients. One such client is the Texas State Department of Corrections. It was work at one of their detention centers that got me interested in volunteering at a facility. About 5 years back, we were installing a parking lot at the Montford Adult Correctional Institute in Lubbock. It's also known by its more appropriate name, the Montford Psychiatric Unit, as all of the inmates have been diagnosed with some type of mental disorder or other. As my men were doing the preparation, concrete placement, and finishing over a number of weeks, I used to watch people walking in and out of the front doors of the facility. It was depressing. Always the same scene. There would be inmates in orange and white striped jumpsuits, trustees, outside the doors sweeping the front steps and picking up trash, cigarette butts, gum wrappers, etc. But mostly sweeping, always sweeping, all day long. Must have been the cleanest set of stairs in all of Texas. I suppose that it was a treat for them, though. After exhibiting good behavior for a while, they were actually allowed outside the unit. I've seen the conditions inside, and boy, I would not want to be locked up in there for too long. Still, the looks in their faces. Blank stares, slack jaws, sweating in the 100-degree sun. As I said, very depressing. I had a lot of experience with mental disorders, being diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder, and being a recovering alcoholic. I found help and comfort through proper medical care and support groups, and I wished that there was some way I could pass that on to these poor men. Then, one day, I discovered how I could. The guards at the front desk came to know me and some of my supervisory crew. They didn't mind if we occasionally came inside the lobby to get out of the summer sun and use the restrooms or buy soda from one of the machines in the waiting room. I was sitting in a chair one day, holding a cold bottle of Big Red to my forehead, when I overheard two women talking nearby. They were well-dressed and obviously not there as visitors. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the few words I heard caught my attention. Apparently, they were volunteers at the prison, bringing the word of the Lord to the inmates confined inside. I told them how much I admired their work and how I had a desire to help in a similar way. And so they suggested that I apply for a position as a pastoral counselor in the unit. Long story short, I did just that. I had to go through some training, what I could and could not bring into the facility, what I could and could not say to the inmates, never share personal information or build friendships, and how to act when inside general population, walking and talking amongst the convicts. It was all pretty much common sense. For the first 8 weeks or so, I had to be escorted in and out of the unit proper. I would arrive, place my boots, keys, wallet, and such on a conveyor belt, turn over my briefcase for inspection, and walk through a metal detector. Then one of the guards at the entrance to the general population would call up to the counselor's office, and someone would come down to get me. During the 8 weeks, I was fingerprinted, interviewed, and a federal background check was run on me. Eventually, I was given a badge of my own and no longer needed an escort. I learned many things in my first few months of volunteering. Bibles were like currency to the inmates, reading material to overcome boredom. Pencils were not allowed in the cell blocks, so the men loved meeting with me to write journals. They spent most of their time doodling ideas for tattoos. The really sick ones, the mentals, as the guards cruelly referred to them, were not allowed into general pop and looked forward to my visits. Most of all, I learned how easy it was to get in and out of prison. Not that I would have ever done it, but I marveled at the fact that, given the right inclination, a body could make a mint smuggling in cigarettes or booze stuffed into their socks. I followed the same ritual every evening that I visited. I'd park in the lot, walk past the trustees who swept the front steps. Wow, did they ever stink! And enter the facility. The guards got to know me and grew comfortable with my visits. They began by waving me through the detector without having to remove my boots or open my briefcase, and eventually started letting me avoid the security check altogether. Next, I was allowed to bypass the desk and go directly behind a filing cabinet where I could retrieve my badge. I wasn't permitted to take it outside the prison. Then I'd get buzzed through an unremarkable metal door and walk down a long, unadorned hallway. At the end of the hall was where the genuine security measures began. The hallway terminated at another door, this one made of double layers of thick, cloudy, bulletproof glass, supported within a frame of 4-inch by 4-inch square steel tubes. I would approach and stand under a camera mounted above the door, lifting both my face and the badge toward the camera in order for the guards inside to verify my identity. Once done, the door would slide open, allowing me to step inside an airlock of sorts. Then the door would slide shut behind me. The compartment was a triangular room with 3 doors, all similar, and a window set into the slide. The guards in control of the doors sat behind the window and would control the doors, opening only one at a time. I came to call them door number 1, 2, and 3, sort of like the game show Let's Make a Deal. I always entered through door number 1, and then was allowed to pass through door number 2 into the prison's general population. From the start, I would always gaze at door number 3 and wonder what was behind it, as it was the only door with darkened glass. Since no more than one door was ever open at one time, I never got a peek inside. During my orientation, I was told that the prison infirmary was back there. When door number 2 opened, the stench was overpowering. No matter how many times you would enter the block, you never did get used to it. Mostly, it was the reek of urine, but was accompanied by the underlying sweet citrus smell as the result of the cleaning fluid that they ineffectively used to mop down the halls. Inmates ambled up and down the halls, always giving you the once-over with their eyes. Occasionally, they'd lock eyes with you and try to stare you down. During orientation, we were never told to look away, to stare them down as you would a stray dog. Looking away would be a sign of weakness. It may seem cruel, but you had to keep them beat down. You had to constantly remind them that you were in charge, that they were nothing. Anything less could lead to unrest and rebellion, and you couldn't have that. The mentals were up on the 9th floor. The elevators, like doorways, were controlled by the guards and monitored by cameras. I would press the single wall button, and eventually the doors would open. I'd step inside, look at the camera, and speak my destination into the camera microphone. Sometimes there would be an inmate or two in the elevator. I never stood with my back to them. I would always stand facing them, my back to the door, staring them down, and for the most part, they would lower their eyes to the floor and try not to look at me. I was instructed never to enter an elevator if it was occupied by an inmate that intimidated me, but I never backed down. At first, I acted brave because I was unsettled, but didn't want to show it. After a while, I felt sympathy for the men more so than fear of them. The 9th floor was divided up into 5 pods, each containing 5 double-occupancy cells. My habit was to rotate which pod I would visit on a daily basis, taking the weekends off. Even though I was educated not to make friends with the prisoners, I have to admit that I looked forward to the visits as much as they did. Sometimes heavily medicated and by far the calmest group of men in the facility, they were, save for a few odd ducks, among the nicest people I'd ever met. So it was, day after day, week after week, month after month, that I would follow the same routine. There were occasional variances on some days, due to fights or unrest among the inmates and general population, but one thing never changed. Every day, as I entered the block, I would look over at door number 3 and wonder what lay behind it. I asked a few times, and was told the infirmary, and after a while stopped asking for fear that someone might become suspicious about why I cared so much. Truth was, I was just a curious person. Once, I even asked volunteers if there was a chance that I could get a tour of the infirmary. Perhaps then visit the men back there, but was told with great firmness that my request would be impossible to fulfill, and that I should let the issue drop. I could almost hear the implied "or else." That just piqued my curiosity even more. My interest grew and grew until one day I decided that I was going to visit the infirmary one way or another. Although my decision was made on a Tuesday, I didn't act immediately. I became more attentive to which guards were working on each day and at each time. Certain ones were more lax or friendlier. It took 2 weeks of studying them and building my confidence until I decided that it was time to act. Exactly 2 weeks and 1 day from the Tuesday that I made my decision, I finally got up the courage to say, "I'm visiting the infirmary today." In my mind, I thought, well, let's see what's behind door number 3, Monty. The guard never even batted an eye. "All right, Hutch, have fun," he said, twinkling his fingers as his eyes dropped back to the video screens in front of him. That easily, the door slid open. Boy, if the stench from General Pop was bad, The odor wafting through door number 3 must have been quite literally 100 times worse. In the hot Texas sun, and with all of the turnkey vultures, roadkill, it never lasted very long in Lubbock. Every once in a while, though, you'd come across a fresh one. That's the closest thing I could think of to describe the smell behind door number 3. It was as if you picked up a day-old dead armadillo, buried your nose in its crushed belly, and took a deep breath. Well, what I imagined it would smell like. I've never really done that. Definitely the smell of rotting meat and gangrene, though. The doors slid shut, and another long hall was revealed. Dimly lit with flickering fluorescence, it was like something straight out of a horror movie. I soon found out that was an extremely appropriate description. Another door at the end of the hall hung loosely from its frame, allowing light to leak out of it. I could hear alternating moaning, crying, and the worst screaming coming from behind the door. I should have turned around and headed back for the exit, but I'd gotten too far. The only way was to go forward and through that door. Although I knew it would seem suspicious, I opened the door slowly and stuck my head around the corner. The best way to seem as if you belong somewhere is to stride right through it with confidence. But I couldn't. I was afraid of what might be behind the door. Heck, I thought it most likely was just a prison hospital. Moaning, crying, screaming, all noises normal for men in pain. It was most definitely not a normal hospital ward. There were at least a dozen men strapped to steel tables, some naked, some in orange prison jumpsuits, and some wearing striped suits like the trustees that I passed every day outside on the stairs. All of them had IVs inserted into their arms, the drip bags containing a fluid that looked like antifreeze. Vital signs monitors were attached to most of them, and I could see by the displays that 2 of the men were clearly dead. There were 2 men and a woman, all wearing lab coats, standing amongst the tables. One of the male doctors looked up in surprise and then beckoned over. Come in. They must have noticed the look of confusion, quickly turning to panic in my eyes. The female doctor began explaining in a soothing voice. Don't worry. You're not the first outsider to stumble his way into our infirmary, and I'm certain that you won't be the last. As you've probably already guessed, what we have here is more of a lab than a hospital. We've just become so used to calling it the infirmary that it's simpler that way. She drew a breath and was about to continue when another of the doctors shouted, It's happening! Everyone, myself included, turned toward one of the tables that held a dead man. Well, previously held a dead man, to be exact. His VSM had jumped to life, and seemingly so had he. He began twitching and then thrashing. Then he began to scream. I had seen a man being burned alive once, when a barrel of hot tar accidentally spilled on him. And the screaming was the same. It was gut-wrenching and made my skin crawl. You could hear the pain and sorrow in it. The female doctor scrambled to inject a syringe of some milky liquid into the man's IV port, and after what seemed like an eternity, although it was probably mere seconds, he calmed and his breathing steadied itself. Here's the thing. They had not been performing CPR on the man when I walked in. There was no defibrillator to be seen. The man was unmistakably dead when I arrived, and during the few minutes we'd been talking. Yet here he was, alive once again, as if he had spontaneously resurrected. Disturbingly, though, his eyes were still clouded over, as if he had cataracts. An uneasy and sick feeling crept its way into my belly. The doctors had not told me anything yet, but on some level, I already knew what was happening, or at least part of it. I was incredulous. What's going on? So, while two of the doctors tended to the resurrected man, the third explained the experiment to me. You see, we were tasked to find out whether or not so-called evil men have souls or not, he began. Of course, I personally do not think that there's any such thing as true evil, but I do wonder if these malcontents have the same sort of spiritual makeup as normal people. After all, why do they do what they do? In 1907, a Haverhill, Massachusetts doctor by the name of Duncan McDougall managed, apparently overcoming any ethical reservations over human experimentation, to put 6 dying people on a bed equipped with sensitive springs, and claimed to have observed a sudden loss of weight, about 3/4 of an ounce, at the exact moment of their death. Having reasoned that such loss could not be explained by bowel movements or evaporation, he concluded he must have measured the weight of the soul. A follow-up experiment also showed that dogs didn't seem to suffer the same sort of loss, therefore they didn't have souls. I'm not implying that these inmates are on the equivalent of dogs, but one must wonder exactly how they compare to normal, healthy human beings. We obviously do not have much control data, but we have recycled these men as much as possible for our research. It was there that I stopped him. Recycled? Oh yes, he brightened. We don't just throw them away. You see, as pleasing consequence of our intended experiment, we found that we were able to revive our test subjects. Revive them? Yes, revive, resurrect, bring them back, whatever you wish to call it. This way, we were able to take measurements and observe through a variety of different conditions, and it's quite ingenious. I really did not know what to say at that point. To question who authorized the experiment, what the ramifications were, how it worked. So I asked the first question that popped into my head. So, do they have souls? He removed a pencil from his breast pocket and tapped the side of his head as if thinking it over. You know, I'm quite certain that they do. As I said, we lack enough data to use as a control. However, it seems that each time we bring them back, they lose a little until, it seems, it's all gone. After a certain point, we can no longer observe any differences. And how long does that take? Usually 4 or 5 cycles. I cocked my head, still in disbelief, over the casual way he was talking about the atrocities they were committing. And what happens then? Oh, sorry, he said, I don't follow you. After you're done with them, what happens to them then? Woo-hoo-hoo. He blew air through his pursed lips. Yes, that's a problem, isn't it? That's currently the little snag we've run into. You see, eventually they just stop dying. He must have seen the look on my face. I mean, it's not as if we haven't tried. We usually put them down in the most humane way. Sedation, paralysis, even the injection of enough potassium to stop their hearts. Then we revive them and do it again, and again, and again. Each time, it gets a little more difficult to put them down until we just can't do it anymore. What? I was just about screaming. In simpler terms, they're basically incapable of dying. Quite a problem. And they really start to stink, he said, as if that were the chief problem. Can't you burn them? Cremate the bodies? It was his turn to look at me in disgust. Oh, now that would be cruel. I held my head in my hands and began to hyperventilate. So where are they? Well, he said, outside, sweeping the steps. With that, I began to feel lightheaded. What caused me to faint, though, was his next question. Mr. He looked at my badge, then into my eyes. Hutchison. Would you consider yourself to be a good person? Do you believe that you have a soul?
You've just heard The Montfort Experiment, written by Kenneth Cole, performed by Otis Gyrie, and produced by Craig Groshek. Some horror stories ask us to fear monsters. Others remind us that the most terrifying horrors are often created by ordinary people convinced they're doing something extraordinary. The Montfort Experiment reminds us that some of the most unsettling horror doesn't come from the supernatural at all. It comes from watching ordinary people justify extraordinary cruelty in the pursuit of knowledge. Kenneth Cole explores the uneasy intersection of science, morality, and faith, asking whether every mystery should be solved and whether some boundaries exist for reasons we were never meant to understand. Long after the story ends, it's the final implication that sticks with you most. Once you know the truth, it's impossible to look back on those seemingly ordinary moments the same way again. Sometimes the greatest horrors aren't hidden in the shadows. They're standing out in the open, waiting for someone to realize what they've been seeing all along. If you enjoyed Otis Gyrie's performance this evening, you'll be pleased to know there are hundreds more waiting for you. Otis served as the sole host of Scary Stories Told in the Dark through its first 15 seasons, before continuing on as co-host for several more, eventually passing the torch to current host Malcolm Blackwood. Across those many years, he delivered hundreds of unforgettable narrations spanning every corner of the horror genre, from psychological suspense and supernatural terror to classic creepypasta and everything in between. We encourage you to explore his incredible body of work by checking out Scary Stories Told in the Dark on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. We think you'll be glad you did. Before we close tonight's episode, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone supporting Chilling Tales for Dark Nights through our exclusive patrons area. For just $7.99 a month, you'll receive ad-free versions of every episode, early access to new releases, exclusive bonus content, and complete access to our ever-growing archive of premium material. Annual memberships are also available at a discounted rate, offering even greater value while helping support every aspect of the production process. Your membership directly helps us continue bringing these immersive horror experiences to listeners around the world, while ensuring that the talented writers, narrators, producers, composers, artists, editors, and everyone working behind the scenes receive the support they deserve. Whether you've been with us since the earliest days, or you've only recently discovered the show, your support helps make everything we do possible, and we're truly grateful to have you as part of the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights community. To learn more, or to become a patron today, visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com. On behalf of everyone here at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. I'm Steve Taylor, and it's been my pleasure to be your host. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, we'd love to hear what you thought. Leave us a comment, follow the show wherever you listen, and if your favorite podcast platform allows it, please consider leaving us a rating or review. Those simple acts make a tremendous difference, helping more horror fans discover the stories we love bringing to life each week. And if you know someone who enjoys thought-provoking horror, unsettling medical mysteries, or stories that blur the line between science and the supernatural, share tonight's episode with them. You just might introduce them to their next favorite nightmare. For even more terrifying fiction, visit creepypastastories.com. And don't forget to follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights across social media for news about upcoming episodes, exclusive announcements, live events, and everything else happening behind the scenes. You'll find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, and YouTube. Until next time, turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Sweet dreams, listeners. Sweet dreams.